If you're somebody who is running your organization's management system, if you are somebody who is trying to work out how to efficiently grow out of this COVID-19 crisis, if you are somebody who's interested in ISO 9001 and understanding how the ISO 9001 standard can be used to grow your organization out of this process, if you are somebody who's invested in this process of ISO 9001 and you're wondering how to make it relevant, if you're somebody who is trying to figure out how to help your organization go forward, I've got lots of great information for you here right now as we talk about ISO 9001 and growing your organization out of the COVID-19 pandemic. There's no getting around the fact that the last 8 weeks, last 3 months globally, but the last 8 weeks have been absolutely crazy for countries like the United States, the UK, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, some of the countries that are close to us in terms of what we do here down in Australia. The last 8 weeks has been absolutely crazy, and a lot of organisations have been completely turned upside down. What I wanted to talk to you about today was the fact that we do have quality management systems in place. We have ISO 9001 as an example, or any of the ISO systems in place, and a lot of cost has been sunk into those things. And if we, I live by one thing that I live by is this terminology that sunk cost is a gift for the future. And I can explain that a little bit later on, but I want you to understand that these management systems have been a gift for us. And in order to, go through the motions and get our organizations going again, if they've been stalled, or getting them organized. Now, organizations like this particular one being very crazy, we're doing some work to get them tidied up and get it organized because it's been very, very busy, but pivoted a little bit, but very focused. So keeping organizations organized, managing risk, going forward is something that I wanted to talk about today. And I've got some common problems here on the whiteboard that I'm going to go through because I really wanted to set the scene for, and talk about some of the conversations that I've been having the last couple of weeks. But more importantly, talk to you about what I've been doing. What I've been doing in our organization and share my experience in terms of what we've been doing. We were hit, I guess, at the beginning of this process with a lot of paralysis, where people were like, stop doing everything, freeze every project. A lot of the work that we do with new clients is about, getting organizations ready for certification, coaching through that, training and educating and mentoring people, or doing the initial certification. So we do ISO 9001 certification. We do ISO 14001 environmental certification. We do ISO 27001 information security certification. We do the ISO 45001 certification. So we help organizations with the risk management, and we obviously do that certification service, and we're doing it all over the world. So what happened to us here in this organization that about 8 weeks ago, it was probably indicators about 12 weeks ago, but then about 10 weeks ago, a lot of the new projects for us just froze. So the people that we were dealing with, they were like, we don't know what's going on, so we're just going to stop everything. And so that for us caused about a 30% decrease in our revenue. So we went into this sort of I went into, as the CEO of Best Practice, this sort of survival mode. And I wanted to talk about how I've used our business management system because, I try to do, what we say we do, if that makes sense, and give you guys examples to use. And that's what we try to do at Best Practice. But I went into a survival mode because we had a 30% reduction in revenue in terms of our top line revenue. If it's healthy to run a business at 20% net profit, our business was probably running at about 5%, and less than that net profit because we're trying to grow our organization. So we put all of our profit back in. So what we were looking at then was about, taking 30% of our revenue and then, cutting that off the top, and then we just weren't profitable. So we were basically looking at about 30% loss. That 30% loss, the 30% loss of revenue converted to 30%, off the bottom of our financials. Now, for most organizations that have got some liquidity, you use the balance sheet to take those hits. And month in, month out, or quarter in, quarter out, you can have a couple of good quarters and you can have a couple of bad quarters or bad months. And the balance sheet is what smooths that out. So organizations have things like, short-term loans. They have assets that they can liquidate. They've got stock they can liquidate. They've got cash in the bank, or they've got overdrafts. So I used our overdraft, which is, the bank lets us go into this temporary loan scenario to carry the losses and to keep us operating, but I couldn't sustain those losses for very long. And so we cut a fair bit of cost out of this organization. We cut our rent on our main fancy 5-star office, moved into some consolidated offices that we have with a number of family businesses. And what I wanted to talk about is how I used our business management system to get through that, because I think that what I've been advocating for over the last couple of years for you guys is I'm trying to deal with two interested parties or two different stakeholders in this process, or two principal stakeholders in this process, and interested parties. And the standards talk about that, but there are some other fringe ones, but there's a couple of key ones. And when I look at the comments on our YouTube channel and the comments on LinkedIn, I get a bit of feedback there, and I wanted to talk about that today. I think it's really important. So if you've come online, let us know where you're watching from. We've got Stan Wall there jumping on board. I had the pleasure of Stan's presence right here in this room yesterday. We had a good long chat for an hour. So welcome back, Stan. So anyone watching there on LinkedIn, in the comments there on LinkedIn, let me know where you're watching from. Say hello, give us a wave. Or if you're watching there on YouTube, give us a wave there as well. So I really want to talk about and a hello. It's good to know where everyone's watching from. So what I want to really do today, while Luke fiddles with the lights and the blinds and things, we've got some sunshine pouring in to this room this morning. It's a lovely morning here in Sydney. Cloudless day, I think it's cloudless. Is really just talk about that. So we did our management review, if you like, which was a board meeting. We had a board meeting. We made some really fast decisions. We increased the frequency of our management reviews. So here at Best Practice, the management reviews are partly done by a board, and there is a board of directors, and partly done by an executive team of managers. There's no extra meeting for management review here at Best Practice. There's no special meeting for management review. We meet the intent of the standards in our board meetings, which happen on usually a bi-monthly basis. We've increased those board meetings to monthly, and the executive meetings happen fortnightly. Now, we also do a quarterly strategy session with the exec team and the board. That happens quarterly. So we meet the intent of management review monthly with our board. At the moment, it's monthly with our board and fortnightly with our executive, and then quarterly with our team doing those meetings, if that makes sense. So what I want you to understand is that it's not set and forget. Management review is not about being set and forget. Management review is about understanding that the frequency needs to change, and you need to have a dynamic management system, and it needs to be relevant. And so now is not the time to stop doing management review, because the top management of the organization doesn't have time to maintain the quality management system. It's those systems and it's that intent that actually helps you grow and move your organization. So we had an emergency board meeting. In that emergency board meeting, we took like 20 minutes to talk about what our costs look like. We had one of the board members then commit to coming and spending some time with me to do an emergency war room budget. And those decisions were made really quickly and then minuted. And then we got on with making some really quick and dynamic changes to the organization, because we couldn't carry those losses. We couldn't, forecasting regular monthly losses for a couple of months in a row, we couldn't carry that. It would have made us insolvent, and we would have had to close Best Practice. And so we're using the business management system and the structures within the different ISO standards to actually help us to control the situation and then to work out how to grow going forward. So what I wanted to do is this morning is really talk about some of the common complaints from two key stakeholders that I get, or key pain points, because I've heard them mentioned a couple of times and I thought it'd be worth talking about. So up here on the whiteboard, I've just put a couple of notes down. You've got your business management system in the middle. I regularly get comments from most people that I really struggle to get top management buy-in. I really struggle to have top management be interested. They're just not interested. I really struggle to have them, they're just not committed. And so what I want you to understand from a top management perspective, that if you're in an administrative quality coordinator, systems coordinator, supervisory managers type role, we do have these common complaints. And so if you feel that pain, that the CEO or the senior leadership, they're just not bought into this, that's very consistent and it's very common. And I can explain why. So if I go over to this side and I talk about myself as a CEO, and I talk about some of the senior leaders that I talk to regularly, that they complain that people build them template management systems, and they build them template quality systems, and they go get templates and they write this stuff. And there's an office over in the corner that's the quality manager's office, and they sit there writing lots and lots of policies. They don't really know what it is. They don't have time to talk about it. They don't have time to read it. And when they do finally get to look at it, it's full of complicated terms that there's no way that the factory staff or the business staff would ever read this stuff or understand it. It's just not relevant. And so that's a common complaint. And that's why, if we deployed some empathy, top management are not bought into it. And so then over here, we've got not helpful. The system's not helpful. I read, the CEO will consistently say, I read the management system, and it's just not helpful to the 22-year-old, metal worker that's down here in the factory, or the 22-year-old cleaner, or the 25-year-old social media intern or marketing intern in the organization. The language just isn't relevant. So it's not really a guide to help run my business. I know we needed to get ISO 9001 certification, but we actually wanted an operations manual to help us run our organization. I wanted to have all my systems and processes documented because we want to be a quality organization. We want everybody in the business to be all aligned, on board, and running this management system. Or it's got constraints. It's red tape, it's bureaucracy, it slows us down. There's too many steps and checks and balances that we need to implement. So I'm just not interested. Like, free me of the shackles. I just want to get on, and I want to go really fast with my organization. So that's the one thing that I wanted you guys to understand, is that we've got complaints on both sides. And so a lot of the stuff that I say and I talk about and I influence is predicated on that. Now, I get why it's got complicated terms, and I get why it's not helpful, and I get why it's got constraints, and I get why there's no top management buy-in, and I get why some people are not interested and they're not committed. So let me explain those sorts of things, because we've got to look at the individual people's priorities right now, and we've got to understand each of those people, why the management system that we might have built, which the intent was it was there to help the organization and do lots of things, that it really doesn't help anybody. Let me give you the example of a Swiss Army knife. Quick show of hands, if you're watching, if you've got a red Swiss Army knife, is that Swiss Army knives are great. You can get the special red Swiss Army knife. It's got the little white cross on it. It's got a knife, and it's got a corkscrew, and it's got a bottle opener, and it's got a screwdriver, and it's got tweezers, and it's got a toothpick, and maybe it's got a saw. Yes, it's got all the tools, but each of those tools in isolation, they're not a very good tool in themselves. Yes, it's handy to have a little tiny knife, and it's handy to have some tweezers, and it's handy to have a toothpick. But each of those tools in isolation, they're not best in class. They're not the right tool for the job. The screwdrivers, yeah, it's a screwdriver and you can put a screw in it, but you wouldn't put screws in it all day, every day. So those are the things that I want you to consider, is that I've seen so many management systems built trying to be everything for everyone and the jack of all trades, without actually specifically focusing on a core intent and then some fringe benefits, if that makes sense. So what's happening over here in top management world right now with COVID-19 is most senior leaders and CEOs, and the CEO of Airbnb, 2 weeks ago, laid off 25% of his staff. And there's quite a famous letter from the media release section of the Airbnb website circulating the internet now about how he did that in a very empathetic, diplomatic way. He's trying to run his organization. So his focus there is, when we start looking at the business hierarchy of needs, we need sales. Then we need profit. Then we can get organized. Then we can focus on an impact, making an impact in the organization, and then we can leave a legacy. So in the business hierarchy of needs right now, because of this COVID-19 crisis, a lot of the business leaders that I'm talking to are focusing on, I just need to get revenue in the door. Airbnb is a good example. Their business just went to zero. There's no Airbnbs. You guys aren't renting Airbnbs for the weekend, get away in the wine region and go wine tasting and stay in a lovely house and light the fire and enjoy winter, or go to a beach house and enjoy summer if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. Airbnb sales went dead. So he's focusing on sales. And he's like, I need to make sure that I am stemming the hemorrhaging bottom line, because we are losing money month on month. And we can only lose money for about 3 or 4 months in a row before we're into liquidation and administration. We have to close the company. And there's lots of examples of that. Here in Australia, Flight Centre is a good example of that. Really big organisation, publicly listed. Go and have a look at the charts of their share price. It's gone from like $50 or $60 down to like $8 or $9 a share. So massive plummeting in price, zero revenue, because no one's booking international travel right now. No one's booking domestic travel. So the travel agent's revenue's gone to zero. Look at some of the airlines, the cheap budget airlines all over the world. Planes are grounded, no revenue. So top management over here, you can't talk to them right now about complicated terms and terminology. We've got to be focusing the management system and the intent of the management system and the relevant parts of the management system on helping this and deploying some empathy over here to keep the organisation going. And my tip there is management review, and my tip there is monitoring and measurement. And so we're going into the ISO standards and we're saying, okay, forget the rest of the management system right now. Let's focus on management review. Let's look at some of the other standards about risk management. What are the things that might be coming up? What are some opportunities? Doing a SWOT analysis. So we can start to say, well, let's go over here. We can get top management buy-in by giving them tools and support to help them get up this hierarchy of control, get sales under control, get profit under control. Then we can get more organized and we can do those nice to have projects. So over here, we can start to say, all right, what can we do to support that? We can do management review. We can do a SWOT analysis. The SWOT analysis starts to spit out the risks, only focusing on risks that are going to be there for in the next 12 weeks. If you're brainstorming things, doing a SWOT analysis or a risk assessment right now, and you can't guarantee that that could happen in the next 12 weeks, forget about it. You're wasting very precious time and very precious resources. So just focusing on increasing the frequency of some of the planning activities and some of the brainstorming activities and the team building activities, so we can say, okay, what do we, actually, we're not going to invest in impact training. We're not going to invest in culture right now. And I know lots of people talking about you've got to maintain culture, and I don't disagree with that. I think you do need to maintain culture. You've got to be very careful with culture, but cultural activities now go from having a massive 5-star cocktail party for 500 people down to taking the team for a walk. So, I've been going for a walk on a Friday. So we've tried to commit with best practice that everybody everywhere in the country goes for a walk at 7:30 on a Friday morning. And so there are a group that live near each other. We go social distancing and we go I do a 20-kilometer walk on a Friday morning and take a couple of my team members with me. We use that as an opportunity to walk and talk. So that would also fit within the intent of communication, consultation, and management review. We do it while we're walking. And we clear our heads, we get out, we feel good, we get activities that are going to get top management buy-in. If you can show support for what they're trying to manage, that's what we're there for. That's what the investment's for. Now, over here, I get it. And someone asked me a question last night on LinkedIn. I get lots of direct messages on LinkedIn. I'm happy to offer assistance. If you've got questions, please direct message me on LinkedIn. I can help you. And they were saying, they watched one of our webinars and they were saying to me, yeah, it's an absolute challenge. I know that you try to simplify the management system, but our customers want the complicated terminology in our quality management system for our contracts. And I get that. That's our stakeholders. And we've got to do our stakeholder analysis, and that's important to understand. But with those stakeholders, I want you guys to focus on maybe there is a public quality manual. There's a quality manual that is specifically used. It's got the terminology specifically written that becomes a public document that goes in tender submissions and contract submissions and government submissions for some of the government contracts. But it's not, we don't want our management system to be the Swiss Army knife. Like, I get it'd be nice to have just one thing, but it's important to recognize that quality manual, if the QA manual, if you have to have one, and I don't think you should have one, but if you have to have one for customers and it has to have complicated terms in it, treat it like a brochure. Treat it like a piece of marketing material and have the marketing representatives in your organization make it look pretty and be great for customers and say the things that you want the customers to say. And I've literally had 3 conversations in the last 24 hours about customer-focused QA manuals and customer-focused inspection and test plans and customer-focused documentation and policies and procedures. It's something that, from my perspective, that that is the that is what I want you guys to focus on, if that makes sense. I'm just conscious of time. This one's going to be short and sweet because I think I'm due on a phone call. I've got a hard out in about 15 minutes or 10 minutes. So let me know where you're watching from. Hello, Northern New South Wales. Hello in India. Stan Wall, we're doing weekly reviews and engagement with key staff while running our current business continuity plan. Absolutely fantastic. So, and also doing the SWOT analysis. Excellent. So Stan is using a business continuity running sheet. So that's something that I want you guys to consider. Okay, then from top management, so we've talked about top management, how to get buy-in. They will become interested, and I guarantee they'll become committed if you can show them how to make it relevant. In terms of it not being helpful, and that is really a question in terms of stakeholders. If you want the system to be helpful for staff, the language is going to be very different to what you're writing for your customers. So the different stakeholders of staff and customers, can you see how the Swiss Army knife analogy is starting to not work? Because we're trying to have this business management system that's keeping top management interested, it keeps the customers happy, and it educates staff. You just can't make it happen. It just doesn't work. And so I guess what I wanted to do today was really apologize for not explaining this in detail and giving some more context around the dynamic nature of what we need to be doing with our management system and how we can actually use that. So being more targeted about who specifically you need to focus on helping. So the second thing, I said increase the frequency of management review. The next thing would be starting to increase the frequency of looking at specific stakeholders and then prioritizing them. Who's most important right now? Key customers, obviously, because as we move up this hierarchy of control here, when we're looking at sales and we need to do sales, hey from Atlanta, Myra, welcome back. Good to see you again there on LinkedIn. So if you're watching on LinkedIn, throw a comment in there and let me know where you're watching from. And hit that like button. Everybody on YouTube and there on LinkedIn, hit that like button so that the algorithm starts to realize that this is good content, and I appreciate that. So as we start looking at that, so tip 1 was increase the frequency of your management reviews and your communication and your risk management, doing SWOT analysis. And tip number 2 was focusing on priority stakeholders. And that was the LinkedIn message yesterday really prompted me to say to you guys, we want to focus on those stakeholders and focus on those key customers and focus on those key parties as we grow our revenue and focus on, then we can start focusing on profitability. But certainly we want to get businesses breaking even and start asking that question. What can the management system do to help the organization now break even? It might be putting some pressure on suppliers to reduce costs, looking at efficiencies, looking at, we've talked a lot about fixed costs and variable costs. My experience over the last couple of months was just about all of our fixed costs became variable costs because I looked at them really, really closely and I went, actually, we can change those fixed costs and we can reduce them. So we had to do that to get our business moving and get it organized and get it controlled and get it sustainable so we can continue to be here for you guys. Hey, Grant from Manly Vale in New South Wales. Grant, I need to talk to you about some temperature sensing cameras. So Grant there at Fleur or he's in Ray Marine. Grant and I have been doing some stuff on a little project on the side together. I'll talk to you about those cameras. So I want you guys to just understand that start looking at your key stakeholders and do a deep dive on those relationships. And now is the time to start soliciting some feedback. So the third tip today would be what customer feedback can you solicit and getting some indication from a customer's perspective about what you can do to help going forward. So I want you guys to understand that and what we can do to start to get control of that. Okay, are there any questions? So if you've got questions for me on this, let me know. Was this information, quick information, helpful? I'll write down my 3 top tips for you guys, but I really want to talk about those problems. So if there's any questions, hit that comment section there. If there's not a question, say no. If this was helpful, say yes in the comments. That would be great. Okay, so the 3 tips are, 1 is increase management review. Top 2 was stakeholder or interested parties, I think the standard's saying stakeholder priority. And 3 is customer feedback deep dive. Now, I've been doing some work with Michael Haynes. Actually, Patil, I think that's your name there, from India. I'll answer your question in a second. Customer feedback deep dive really is about understanding how your customers' needs, wants, desires, requirements, requests have changed, and also are there any fringe customers that you could be working with. So doing a deep dive, the work we've been doing with Michael Haynes, I want you guys to look out for the workshops that we're promoting with Michael Haynes. If you're not on our email list, go to www.bestpractice.biz and subscribe to the email newsletter so that you get the invitation to the upcoming business-to-business marketing webinar that we're running. It's in a couple of weeks' time. We're doing a deep dive in terms of business-to-business strategy, and we can expand on this for you, how to do in depth. It's a paid webinar. It's going to be live. It's a paid webinar where I can give you contextual answers. It's not a public thing. It's in confidentiality with everybody who joins that workshop. That I can give you the deep dive on how to do this, solicit this customer feedback, and go really deep on that business-to-business relationship with those customers and how to go about taking those steps, what we do, what other people have done, and I'll give you the tips and the methodology on how to get really deep into that customer space so that you can start to use that information and that feedback. Now, what Michael Haynes, who is co-presenting that particular webinar, calls that is listen. So we need to get in and listen, and we need to do some deep, active listening. So if there's no specific questions, we have our internal audit scheduled. Any suggestion to focus? Yes. Right now, if you've got your internal audits scheduled, I want you to focus on customers and customer listening and customer research. I want you to go and do your deep internal audits on how do we do our customer research? How do we identify customer expectations? How do we document customer expectations? How do we capture customer expectations and customer requirements? How do we identify future customer requirements? Don't go and do an internal audit right now on the contract and checking you did everything you said you'd do 3 or 4 months ago, because COVID-19 has changed everything. Right now, your focus in internal audits, in management reviews, in documents, in any of this stuff you're doing must be on the future. Forget the past. The past is different. It's not going to be the same in the future, and your management systems are not built to handle your organizations going forward because they're changed. You're going to have less staff, less people, less resources, more demanding customers. Now is the time to increase frequency of management review and start asking those questions about the deep dive on what customers are to ask for. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for that feedback. Hey, Michael, big shout out to you on listening. So thanks for joining us there. So I want you guys to look into and get on our email list if you're not there already, so that you go to bestpractice.biz, put in your details so you get on our email list there, and then we can get you out that invitation to the upcoming marketing business-to-business strategy webinar. But I want you guys to be doing more listening, and that's how it fits into your quality management system. Okay, if there's no further questions, people must remember to listen to customers, document that feedback, and share that feedback. That's exactly right. The other thing that I want you guys all to think about, Michael Haynes, this applies to you as well. I want you guys to draw an organizational chart of your customer's organization. I want you to physically draw that. If there's a specific organization that you're targeting, and your quality management system and your ISO management system should be really thinking about empathy. How do we empathize with the customers we're working with? Quality management system, well, who's the quality for? It's for your customer. But a lot of us are focusing internally. We're writing policies and procedures and all this stuff internally, and we completely forget the fact that there's a customer outside across the road who wants to give us money, but we're writing all this internal stuff because we need to, specifications and sizes and shapes and colors and all that sort of stuff. outwardly focused on customers. That's the pivot that we need to make right now. And that's how we will use our business management system to grow out of this COVID-19 pandemic and this global economic crisis. So I want you to draw an org chart. What does it look like? Who's the CEO? Who are the teams that are involved? And I just want you guys to understand that most of the organizations that you're dealing with are smaller than you think. And this applies to everybody. I can see who's watching. I can see who's liking the posts. The people that you're dealing with, the companies that you are dealing with, the teams that you are dealing with are smaller than you think they are. So I don't want you to be thinking, oh, there's a team over here that deals with that or a team that deals with that. It'll be one person. In this organization, it's not a very big organization. We punch a long way above our weight and we're a high performance organization, but we're smaller than you think we are. So I don't want you to be concerned about that from our perspective, but I want you to be concerned about that from your customer's perspective. They're not all, yes, they may be a big multinational, but you're dealing with a small team. And when you start saying, oh, there might be 2 or 3 people, it will often be, a lot less. It's often half the number of people than you think. And this is advice for everybody. It's my final sort of bonus tip. Have a think about that. Yes, Michael, I agree with you. There is a useful discovery process that people should be using as part of this listing process. And Michael Haynes can definitely share that with you. But even you, Michael, this advice is for everybody. The teams of people you are dealing with are smaller than you think they are. Do that and look at it. Because I think what I've been seeing from a lot of people is the advice in the comments are too generic. And that is something that I've actually fallen into that trap. And that's how I wanted to change today and give you some very specific information to go deep on this. So management review at best practice includes the board monthly. It includes our executive fortnightly. There's no extra management review. We do offsite strategy or strategic planning quarterly. We binned that quarterly strategy planning because we went into emergency mode. There's no strategic plan sessions offsite with lovely lunch and all that sort of stuff planned. Because we're focusing on sales and revenue right now. So I want you guys to understand that our management review is the board and our executive managers, and it's the board monthly, the executive managers fortnightly, and that is management review here at Best Practice. And that is how I want you guys to run your management review going forward. Okay, excellent. No further questions. I want to wrap this up right now. So I'm going to be live the same time in 24 hours. Tomorrow, I'm talking more about selling and sales and marketing as the front end of all of this at the bottom of that hierarchy of control, business hierarchy of control I just showed you. So if you don't see me out and about, which you won't because I'm social distancing and we're all just about in lockdown, you will definitely see me right here next time on Best Practice TV. Hit that like button. If you need to share this with somebody, please copy the links, tag them in the comments if there's someone that needs to hear this or see this. I'd appreciate that. The more people that you tag, the more people get to see this and the more people hear this great message. And I'll see you next time in 24 hours time, right here on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Instagram, and Best Practice TV. Bye for now.